following program is brought to you in living color on NBC.
I'm sure that the American people will realize that I take this action with the greatest regret, and only because of the clear, the unmistakable, and the undisputed evidence that Governor Romney of Michigan and the local officials in Detroit have been unable to bring the situation under control. Law enforcement is a local matter. It is the responsibility of local officials and the governors of the respective states. The federal government should not intervene except in the most extraordinary circumstances. The fact of the matter, however, is that law and order have broken down in Detroit, Michigan. Pillage, looting, murder, and arson have nothing to do with civil rights. They are criminal conduct. And the federal government, in the circumstances here presented, had no alternative but to respond, since it was called upon by the governor of the state, and since it was presented with proof of his inability to restore order in Michigan. We will not tolerate lawlessness. We will not endure violence. It will not be tolerated. This nation will do whatever it is necessary to do to suppress and to punish those who engage in it. I know that with few exceptions, the people of Detroit and the people of Newark and the people of Harlem and of all of our American cities, however troubled they may be, deplore and condemn these criminal acts.
As President Kennedy said, those who make peaceful revolution impossible only make violent revolution inevitable.
But when things came together in the 60s, it was like the dam finally burst. The outrage of generations and centuries poured forth with massive force, with people rising up and burning down sites and symbols of oppression in one city after another, including in the capital of Washington, D.C., reaching to within a few blocks of the White House and other government buildings and causing the rulers of the country to cower and tremble.
4,700 paratroopers from the 101st and 82nd Airborne Divisions began arriving Monday afternoon. Soldiers from these same units had been sent to protect black school children in Little Rock in 1957 and James Meredith at Ole Miss in 1962. At the president's order, they would not be deployed in Detroit unless absolutely necessary. Johnson's envoys assessed the situation.
There are about 100,000 people like them in Detroit, the lost, the dispossessed people outside our society.
The Swedish economist Gunnar Myrdal, who coined the term an underclass, people under the entire social structure and somehow cut off from it. In 1960, 10% of the Negro population in our country was not even counted in the census. Among young men, upwards of 25% were just missed altogether. And you're really down when you're not even a statistic.
Now, some say this kind of uprising doesn't do any good. Well, they're wrong.
Looting and burning had continued into the second day. Firefighters from over 35 communities were on the streets. Police arrested 3,900 people by Monday night. There was no end in sight.
I was totally wiped out. It got to a point where I had to watch out for my temper. It got to a point where those persons who were yelling and screaming about down with the whitey and all of that, I was looking into his eyes and wanting to knock the hell out of him because he didn't know what the hell he was talking about.
From a distance, the life of this class has a certain attraction. It has a certain glamour. It's a world of Saturday night. And the restraints and respectability of regular lives seem pretty boring and dull by contrast. But it's only when you get up close do you see the pain. It's only up tight that you realize here is a world in which there's very little love, and there's very little of anything that lasts, and there's so much hurt.
This is 26 for President Type B. Victor Charlie Sam Land located on altitude north of Helen Break.
Everybody got in there. I got in the belly, you better go.
These rebellions woke many people up, made society as a whole take notice, and even in the short run forced certain changes. For example, in Detroit, thousands who before could never get hired were hired right off the streets of the ghettos into the auto factories after the massive rebellion there in 1967. All of a sudden, the auto companies found that they did have jobs for them.
At 11:20 Monday night, President Johnson sent the federal troops into Detroit. They were ordered to carry unloaded weapons. At least 19 people had died since the raid on the Blind Pig.
Sergeant, you've just recently returned from Vietnam. Could you tell us how it feels to have to come from one zone of combat in a foreign land to one in your own land?
It's not a good feeling, not one I'm kind of proud of, but it's a job, it's a duty. They have to be done, and it's something different.
Did you ever expect this kind of call when you joined the service?
I expected calls, but it kind of surprised me when I got there that morning, and they said, fall out with all your gear, keep going. And I said, where?
What happened was that a great underclass formed in the Negro urban community. And the fact that such a class turned violent is about as natural as a social process can be.
America, America, later for America. What has America done for me? Nothing, but made me a zombie. I don't know who I am. I try to act like somebody else. No name, no language, no culture. Got our women acting like some Aunt Jemimas, Julius, Sapphires. Got our men acting like Sesame Fetching, Man-Time Olin, Willie Best, and some Rochesters. What has America done for me? Nothing, but made me a zombie. Took away my uncle life, gave me some groceries, some dead white man hanging from it, teaching us about Mary had a little lamb. Mary was white, the lamb was white, and what about old Snow White? Old Mother Hubbard went to the cupboard to give her poor dog a bone. I lied. She gave the dog a steak and gave the bone to Negroes. Neck bones, pig feet, ham hocks, chitterlings, guts. Made her gut eaters, whiskey consumers, soap users, Uncle Tom niggas. That's what America done for me. Made me a robot, a Frankenstein, a puppet. What has America done for me? Nothing, but made me a zombie. Integration, segregation, humanization, emasculation, frustration, and complete annihilation. If you are preaching a just education, we are taught to hate ourselves. That everything right is right. We are taught to hate ourselves. Everything we learn is right. Jack and Jill is right. Dick and Jane is right. Little Bo Peep is right. Little Jack Horner is right. Little Red Riding Hood is right. History is right. Civics is right. Math is right. Spelling is right. Social studies is right. Santa Claus is right. And he coming down from Black Chimney. Shut up! No wonder black people hate themselves. America, America. Why did you bring us here, America? America, why did you bring free us here? To make slaves. To make us work for no pay. Yeah, for no pay. Work all day for no pay. America, America, why did you bring us here? America, America, why did you bring us here? We are supposed to be free, but not conform hypocrisy. They had us on the high seat, and they got the nerve to let us sing. My country is a thee. Can't you see the hypocrisy? America, America, why did you bring us here? America, America, why did you bring us here? Boo! For employment. Boo! For poverty. Boo! For slums. Boo! For slavery. Boo! For lynching. Boo! For murderers. Boo! For assassination. Boo! Boo! Boo for America! Today is ours.
Clearly the presence of a large number of National Guardsmen and federal troops, along with a boasted police department that had an armed presence out there. So the looting was all over. The curfew had been put into effect.
In total, there were 17,000 law enforcement people in Detroit. The disorder was 3 days old. Much of the looting and burning had ended. But exhausted and still heavily armed, National Guardsmen and state and local police continued their patrols.
You call us savages and beasts and mad dogs running the street burning and looting, but we're doing this not for the destruction of the world, but we're trying to prove one point. We want freedom and justice and equality. We want to be treated equal.
Who speaks for him? Who speaks for them? Who speaks for their frustration, for their rage? No one speaks for them yet, but the extremists, the revolutionaries, speak to them.
We have gotten our manhood back by the acts of violence. When the brother throws a brick or snipes from a building, that he has just returned to his manhood.
Personally, I advocate violence. I accept it. When people die, it's just part of a revolution. I accept it. I'm sorry that they're dead, but it's just one part of a revolution. People have to die. Some gonna live and some gonna die.
The extremists, the revolutionaries, say the black people have been left with no alternative but to gain by violence what they've been denied by peaceful means.
Let's get into the inner workings and the meaning of this. Let's get into the inner workings and the meaning of a black revolution and why black people have a right to take what's theirs. You can read the platform in the program, and it's a basic program, and it simply says exactly what black people have been crying for 400 years. One, we want freedom. We want power to determine the destiny of our own black communities. Two, we want full employment for our people. Three, we want decent housing fit the shelter of human beings. Four, we want an end to the robbery of the black community by the white racist businessman. Five, we want decent education that teaches us about the true nature of this racist, decadent system, an education that teaches us about our true history and our role in society and the world today.
One night, a black co-worker and I were driving up Grand River, which is a major artery in Detroit. And we're about to turn left onto Joy Road when all of a sudden we realized that this convoy of state police cars had made a U-turn and were pulling us over. So I came out of the car with my hands up, and what I saw was I was circled by people with long guns and pistols, and they were all pointing at me, and they were all nervous people, and they were all white. And I'm a black guy, and I'm a high government official, but I was a nigger in white America, and I thought at that moment I was going to be dead. 35 years old and dead at the corner of Joy Road and Grand River.